America presents Worldview Radio with Brandon House.
And welcome. Glad you're with us on this February 4th, 2025. It's going to be a long day, folks. It's going to be a long day. Dalton, they're not hearing me, Logan. Logan?
What's the date?
Today is, what did I say, Dalton? 2024? I said February 4th, didn't I? It's March 4th. What did I say, guys? Why can't I keep the date straight? I don't know.
February.
It is. I said February? Oh, Sorry, Dalton. Thank you for the correction. It is March 4th. Yeah, otherwise they're going to think it's the best of, wouldn't they, Dalton? And they'd all turn off. That's assuming he has best ofs, is what Dalton just said in his head himself. Or we call it an evergreen. March 4th. Thank you, Dalton. 2025. There you go. Sometimes I just go into autopilot and I won't even try to make excuses for it. It's right in front of me. March 4th, 2025. Now, it's going to be a long day because we have President Trump coming to speak tonight to a joint session of Congress. So what would you like to hear him say? That's when we open the phone lines up, that's one of the things I'd like to know. What would you guys like to hear the president say? The interesting thing is he's going to have an opportunity on all the networks. We'll be joined by Dan Eastman, an attorney, by the way, and an economist from the great state of Wisconsin to talk about global trade wars and are we headed toward a global recession? Okay, so stay tuned. But back to what I was saying. What would you want President Trump to say tonight if you were advising him? Because he's going to have, NBC, CBS, NBC, and all the other ones. Now, I was discussing this earlier this week, that a lot of boomers, and maybe even some of them that voted for Donald Trump, a lot of boomers still get their information from the mainstream corporate media. A lot of baby boomers have switched over to, podcast and different things like that. But many of them still get their information. They wake up and they get their information from the same places they've been getting them from for decades, which means they don't always know really what's going on. They hear the propaganda, which, by the way, did you see the Democrats today put out some talking points and they were all saying the same thing, literally saying the same thing in their individual videos, down to the word. So this is President Trump's opportunity to explain things to the American people without the filter of sound bites or just ignoring him, as some outlets do. So here is a unique opportunity for him to put forth what's really been going on, what they've been finding out with Doge, what they're not going to do with Social Security or Medicaid or Medicare, and the scare tactics. This is his opportunity to speak to that. Then, of course, his desire not to see us go to World War III, his desire not to see us dragged in with Article 5 of NATO to fight Russia. And of course, we know last night it was announced that he's not going to be funding Ukraine anymore. Zelensky's come running back. I'm sorry, I want a peace deal. We'll see where all this goes. But I had a whole panel last night with Colonel Rob Maness, David Pine, Leo Holman. And again, we were talking about the fact that you have a real possibility of having war. If the Europeans really want to put boots on the ground and planes in the air, as Stormer said, this could indeed trigger a response by Putin, and thus Article 5 of NATO, unless we pull out of NATO, which we need to do, I think, personally, don't you guys? I mean, we're funding it all, and look how they treat us. And why are we defending NATO anyway? Why are we defending those NATO alliances, as Vice President J.D. Vance said in his speech over there in Germany? You guys don't even allow for free speech. You arrest people for just simply speaking truth that you don't like. You arrest people for quietly praying, no disturbance, no violence, just privately, quietly in their own heart and mind, praying in front of an abortion clinic, and you arrest them. Why would we want to defend these values and these nations and pay for it? And then have the risk of going to war and having to send our money and national treasure of our sons and daughters to battle? No. NATO needs to go. So this is President Trump's opportunity. What would you want to hear him say tonight or explain? We'll get your thoughts on that. We open the phone lines. In the meantime, there was today a comment by Justin Trudeau of Canada about the tariffs that President Trump's putting on Canada and other countries as well. And some are saying, well, this might lead to a global recession. Let's bring on attorney and economist and citizen of the great state of Wisconsin and a broadcaster at Worldview too, Dan Eastman. Dan, welcome back to the broadcast. Thanks for being with us.
Oh, hi, Brandon. Thanks for having me on. It's always a pleasure.
Great to have you here with us on these 70-something blowtorch stations of VCY America and on WROS out of Florida and Worldview 2. Okay, let's go first. Explain what's going on here with the tariffs. We'll play a clip by Trudeau here in a second and one by Governor DeSantis of Florida, what he's saying about Canada. But explain what President Trump's doing, the reasoning behind it, and the impact he's hoping. Because I see a chocolate company, is it called Lindt? L-I-N-D-T? Lindt is going to be bringing their chocolate company from Canada to America to avoid tariffs. Is this, are we going to see more companies leaving Canada to come to America to do this? And is this going to create some kind of global recession? The floor is yours.
Well, keep in mind our dear neighbors to the north, the beloved Canadians, we love them dearly, but keep in mind that the Dominion of Canada is the personal property of one King Charles III of England. That's his deal, and he has a government up there, and those people are subjects of the crown, whether they like it or not. And at the end of the day, we love the Canadians, and we've had a long relationship, sometimes a little tepid in the early 1800s, but at the end of the day, we're very much the same people. And it's important to understand that tariffs were designed originally as sort of an entrance fee into a country. And I'll talk about the United States back in the olden days of the 1700s, and especially after the Constitution was adopted and the United States became a real entity. The idea was to keep the foreign-made goods out so that the American economy could develop and grow into its own manufacturing base. So effectively, the federal government charges other countries, other companies that are outside of the U.S. to do business in the United States. It's not a tax, it's a tariff, but it's an entrance fee. It's a fee to pay to play type thing. You want to sell your stuff in America, you have to pay the tariff. And that's how the federal government funded itself through the formative years. Tariffs from stuff coming in, as well as the sale of land as we negotiated and sold the land to the settlers. So tariffs have always been a restrictive device to protect the home markets so the markets could develop. And back in the day, of course, we have in the Constitution, we have trademarks, patents, and copyrights to give people in the United States a monopoly on their inventions or their creations so that they could prosper and grow. It was all done to build. But then later, tariffs became a way to try and balance political objectives. If you put a tariff on countries, let's pick on China and say, okay, we send our American dollars to China, and they make a lot of things because their labor rate is so much lower than we have in the United States. And we can buy things cheaper made in China than we can make here because we have a much higher labor rate. Well, our dollars go to China. China sends stuff. We use the stuff, it goes into our landfills. We buy more from China. It's a continuous do loop. So what the president is doing very, very wisely is setting up a quid pro quo or a balance. By putting tariffs in place, it is costing more for these companies to sell into the United States, which gives the American economy breathing room to create and to develop its own manufacturing base. And you talked about the Lindt chocolate company moving to the United States. We look at Apple now bringing, was it $500 billion and 20,000 new employees? What that does is stimulates the growth of the American economy by keeping the foreign stuff at bay. And you do that through tariffs because tariffs are effectively a way to increase market price. The market will clear and it'll set a price for imported goods. But when the government steps in and puts a tariff on, then those goods are more expensive in the domestic market, which gives the substitution effect, basically says you'd buy from an American manufacturer at the same price. And of course, there's a revenue component to the tariffs. I mean, the money comes into the federal treasury, and that's nice because we're running a $2.5 trillion deficit. But at some point, tariffs are not taxes, and they're not permanent. These are things used by the president since George Washington to effectively rebalance trade and to advantage the United States. And I think President Trump's strong suit is putting America first. And instead of us just making money and sending it offshore and importing stuff, and we use the stuff, it ends up in a landfill, let us stimulate our American economy, which creates jobs, it creates vendor networks, there's more stuff sold, our gross domestic product grows because of the stimulation, and it's a very wise thing to do. But President Trump also points out that the United States has been the fool in the international community for a very long time. And that's why you talk about Europe. You know, we still look at Europe through the lens of our pioneering ancestors leaving a feudalistic society where serfdom was not so far in the rearview mirror, and effectively looking at Europe as something special. But Europe is deteriorating under its own accords. If you look at their governments, their policies, the way they govern themselves, they're doing it to themselves, and you can see that the world is washing old Europe away. It's a new world. You have China, you have Russia, you've always had, the United States. Powers are shifting, and Europe doesn't matter. And that's the real point that I think President Trump is trying to make. There was this thing on the internet that said, that there's 500 million Europeans worried about 180 million Russians, and they want 300 million Americans to pay for it. We don't want to pay for this anymore because we're running a $2.5 trillion deficit where they tax, borrow, and spend. Those aren't tax dollars. Those are federal dollars because they're created by the tax base and the borrowing. We have $38 trillion in national debt, $1 trillion in interest on the national debt. And the problem is this is unsustainable for our society, but we can't control the federal mechanism. So now we have President Trump stepping in and doing very wise things, and it's important to support this effort. Now, some people will say, yeah, but it's going to cost Americans more for goods, imported goods or domestic-made goods. Well, you ought to step back and see what it's costing you to be an American today. Take a look at your pay stub. If you're a W-2 employee, like most Americans are, and you look at your take-home pay versus your gross pay, let me tell you something, folks. You're paying. We have got to right the ship, and President Trump is absolutely right in doing this. And with the Elon Musk and the Doge team, they have a technology that can see every last digital federal dollar that ever existed and exists today. They can track every dollar, where it goes, wherever, right into the old checkbooks of the people making $30 million for running a $160,000 government job, and you got $30 million in net worth. They can see it all. For the first time in American history, they can see it all. And that's why it's so very important what Doge is doing and what President Trump is doing. And these tariffs are a way to send a message to the world that we're not playing the game like we used to.
Dan Eastman, hold right there, Dan. I want to ask you about several things you said there and play a clip when we come back of the Prime Minister of Canada, Trudeau. He's out today. And then there's a response because I think he's talking about telling Canadians to boycott America, American products, and boycott Florida. Well, that didn't really threaten the governor of Florida much at all today. You'll hear what the governor of Florida had to say about that today. That and more, and of course your calls, and what you would advise President Trump talk about tonight if you're one of his advisors. Brandon House Live here on Worldview Radio. We'll wait.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Is the government tracking you? Do they have access to all your data? Well, if you go to worldviewtalk.com, you'll find out about a cell phone company that, does not store your data. They don't do that. This is what they're known for. They don't store your data. You have privacy. You're not being tracked. That's why a lot of folks are turning to worldviewtalk.com. You'll find their prices are very competitive. All the details are there at worldviewtalk.com. Again, worldviewtalk.com. Oh, while you're there, not only do they have cell phones that aren't tracking you, you can find out about how to get a satellite phone. Should the whole system go down and you want to communicate with a family member or a loved one, you might want to have a satellite phone. Or how about their solar generators? They have great solar generators. Check them all out right now. Worldviewtalk.com, worldviewtalk.com.
Radio here on March 4th, 2025. And hey, don't forget, next month, can you believe it? Next month, we haven't held a Worldview weekend rally in 7 years. We've had our national conference, of course, but we stepped back off the road, and we are going to be with you, and we chose Milwaukee. Well, all the places we could choose after 7 years off the road, we chose our dear listening friends in Milwaukee. Now, that's not to say anything about the rest of you living anywhere else, other than we just think Milwaukee is a very great community and town to hold it in, with VCY America headquartered there, the great Waukesha Expo Center we've been going to for so many decades. And now, of course, it's easy for so many of our listening friends to get there from so many key places. So I hope you'll come join us. It's free. It's our Worldview Radio Understanding the Times rally. We're going to be talking about the issues of the day through the lens of a Christian worldview. Obviously, you're going to talk a little Bible prophecy, mix it all in because it all fits together. But it is on Tuesday night, April 15th. It's free, but you have to have a ticket so that we know we have enough seats put out, okay? So if you want to get a ticket, you got to register everyone you're bringing. Go back in each time, one at a time, register them with their name. You can use your same email address. We got to register every single individual one at a time. You can do that at worldviewtube.com/events. worldviewtube.com/events. Okay? Love to have you with us. And I think Dan Eastman's going to show up. I think Congressman Glenn Grotham is going to make an appearance. And it's going to be myself, Andy Woods, and Aaron Lavarco, our Israeli reporter. He's supposed to be there live in person, folks. That's what he says. He's going to be in the States. So we said, come on over. There you go, worldviewtube.com/events. All right, Dan Eastman joins me. Dan, you talk about the fact if you think this is cheap now, look at the taxes are being drawn out of your paycheck. But at some point, if the products prices go up and you're also paying these big taxes, something's got to give. So are we going to see a decrease in taxes so they can fund the government more for tariffs? Trump's Commerce Secretary said, yes, Trump's ultimate goal is to get rid of the IRS. Do you think that's really going to happen? Because, by the way, I'm not encouraging it, but we have a lot of people that we know that have said, and even one of my hosts, she has come on and said she's done paying taxes. She's not paying any more federal taxes. To have it go to terrorist and NGO, she's done. Now, I'm not saying that's what I'm going to do. That's not a hill I'm willing to die on, Dan. But I do know other people, and I'm getting emails from people saying, why should I keep paying for this? Or to go to terrorists and terrorist organizations and foreign governments. The American people's stomach has completely, turned over. And I wonder if that was part of Trump's goal, right? Let's get the American people the truth about where their money's going. And then let's get the people behind the idea of eliminating the IRS, going to a national sales tax maybe instead, or funding it all with tariffs. What do you think the ultimate goal here is? But you would think President Trump would know. If you do this, how are you not going to incite people to say, I'm done paying you guys federal taxes to fund terrorists that want to kill me and my kids and grandkids? He had to know the Americans would all of a sudden want to have a Boston Tea Party, right?
Well, that's a really interesting discussion. First of all, I plan on paying my taxes.
Me too. Me as well.
But let's think this through. When you look at what an income tax is, it is a throwback to this European idea of serfdom, that the federal government, the sovereign, has a right to 40-50% of your income, and it's voluntary, but if you don't voluntarily pay your taxes, you're going to voluntarily sit in jail. See? So the point is, this is what the American people are coming to realize, and this is the beauty of the Doge situation. We can now look into the federal government top to bottom. We can see where the money went, and all the dirty tricks that the federal government wanted to do but couldn't do, all of that money was funneled into these NGOs, and the people who run these NGOs became fabulously wealthy on not only taxpayer dollars, but federal borrowed dollars. We call them federal dollars. And people are seeing that, and you're saying, I don't want to pay for this nonsense any longer. I don't want to support the Ukraine. That's a European problem. Let the Europeans deal with it. Leave the American checkbook out of it. And the same thing around the world. When you look at how much waste and inefficiency and outright fraud and theft Nobody wants their tax dollars to eat. You don't mind paying taxes locally to put up a new bridge, you municipal or county or state taxes. It's tax and spend. They tax and they spend the money. You may not like it, but you got a new public park, or they added a couple of squad cars. That's an argument for the community. But when you get to the federal government, they take what they can take until people squeal, and then they borrow the rest and put it on your credit card, and then they spend it on places you don't know anything about, on policies you have no interest in, and you're embarrassed about. Look at the young Ukrainians who've been killed on the battlefield. For what? For what? And this is what American taxpayers are seeing. And you say, you know what? You go to the auto show and you're looking at what used to be a cheap car that's costing you 50 grand for a cheap car. You go to the grocery store, you go anywhere, anything you want to do, buy gasoline, food, and people are saying, you know what? We have been the fools. We've been the fools all these years. And that's what I think President Trump should be talking about tonight. The American people is, look, it's time to wake up. Turn the TV off, turn the sports off, pay attention to what's happening to you. And what I'm trying to do is liberate you from this tax situation. There should not be a tax on income. And if you look back to serfdom, that's exactly what serfdom was for 1,200 years. And if you take it to the horrors of slavery, which is capturing all of the value of a person's life, and maybe give them a wooden shack to live in, those are the nightmares, that you capture someone's life and earnings either through slavery or serfdom. And that's what the Americans have tolerated since 1913. It's time to turn the sports channel off and start thinking about what society do you live in, and where do you want your government funding, overthrowing governments and doing all this dirty tricks. And is there a country we haven't invaded in the last 50 years? This is what President Trump should be pointing out to the American people, that this federal government needs to be reeled in and shrunken so dramatically that it cannot reemerge in the totalitarian structure that we have today, run by nonprofits and mystery dark money people. No, the federal government should be minuscule and the power returned to the people at the state level, where it's tax and spend, and the people can look at their budgets and realize that every dollar that I spend is going for a bridge or a road or a park or feed the poor or whatever. You can see it. And I think President Trump really, really has to point to that. And keep in mind with this Canadian situation, a couple of weeks ago, the prime minister lost some vote and he was supposed to be voted off the island. Well, he's still running around. He's still, it takes a long time to get rid of these people. But Canada has 40 million people, and they're all subjects of the king. Okay, think about that. 300 years later. But California has 40 million people, and that's a state. That's one state. So this idea of incorporating Canada in the United States is not as far-fetched. Now, of course, we don't like thinking about occupying other people's countries. But I'll tell you, the Canadians wouldn't have to worry about a vacation in Florida. If they, the Privileges and Immunities Clause, the federal Constitution, you can go vacation anywhere you want, as long as you're an American. There's a lot to this, and I think we really have to stop and say, as Americans, wait a minute. We've been snookered, folks. I mean, these people have played us for fools for a very long time. And now with Doge, we can see it. It's the one thing we never had before. But with the Doge mechanism, and people don't understand that technology is vastly sophisticated.
It is so
this
powerful,
isn't some guy
Dan.
at green eyeshade looking at numbers. This is serious stuff.
It is
We're
so
spying on the federal government.
Right.
What's going on?
They're spying on the federal government. It is so powerful, and I'm sure Elon is using some of his powerful AI computer that is right here in our backyard in the Mid-South, just a few miles from where I'm sitting. And Logan, what did we say? He said that those machines are running so big, they're running so fast that they're overheating, that they had to use how much of the world's, of America or the world's coolant? Was it the America's or the world's? 2/3 of the world's coolant, liquid coolant. They were backing up semi-trucks to the plant to pump in the coolant to keep those machines cool as they were running. So they're able to do this and see, and it is quite amazing. Now listen, now I think it's coming over that President Trump will announce tonight, Dan, that I guess he has a minerals deal with Zelensky. Is that right, Logan? So they're planning on receiving and signing today and announcing that tonight. We'll see how that works out. Now, let's go to the Prime Minister of Canada. Listen to this, folks.
This is a trade war, yes. But Canadians are hurt. Canadians are angry. We're going to choose to not go on vacation in Florida or Old Orchard Beach or wherever. We're going to choose to try to buy Canadian products and forego bourbon and other classic American products. And yeah, we're probably going to keep booing the American anthem. But let me tell Americans, we're not booing you. We're not booing your teams. We're not booing your players. We're booing a policy that is designed to hurt us. And we're insulted. And we're angry. But we're Canadian, which means we're going to stand up for each other. We're going to fight. And we're going to win.
All right, they're going to fight and win. Now, there you go. The governor of Florida, I think he is actually addressing the entire state legislature when he says this. Here's his response.
Flock to our state and investment to Florida surge. We continue to set tourism records. 2024 saw more than 142 million visitors come to the state of Florida. This includes 3.3 million visitors from Canada. That's not much of a boycott in my book. Maybe they wanted to get a glimpse of what a Stanley Cup winning hockey team actually looks like.
So that is the Florida state legislature. So there you go. Pretty good response. By the way, this is also a governor that's talking about what really a socialist idea property taxes are. I don't know. We played that clip earlier in the week on one of our programs. So, I mean, it seems to be, Professor Eastman, there seems to be the winds of economic liberty and freedom blowing like we've never seen coming from politicians. I mean, it's pretty amazing. I've never seen this in my lifetime. Have you?
No, I haven't. And, with respect to property tax, it goes right back to the old days of serfdom. When you owned, in Europe, when you were a serf, you didn't own the land. The king owned the land, just like Canada. And the king allocated rights to the nobles, and the nobles had a bunch of serfs that lived there. But if you didn't pay your your duty, your serf fee, you're gone. And we have this, people in America think, I'm going to own my own home. You do, but you don't. Because if you don't pay your property taxes, the sheriff's going to come and sell that house on the courthouse steps, and you're going to be gone. And the next guy will pay those taxes. So it really is a throwback to serfdom, where the people of this sovereign, the United States of America, we like to think about, eating apple pie while driving our Chevy and watching the eagles fly. But I tell you, freedom is an interesting concept. When you don't own your home, if you don't pay your taxes, and half of your income goes to taxes off of your paycheck, that's an interesting form of freedom. What I was saying to my show today is that we ought to have a warning label. Government's big on warning labels. Right at the border, warning label. Warning, if you enter the United States, we're going to take half of your income and you're going to have to pay annual rent to live here, even if you own your own home. Put a big warning sign up. Hey, don't sneak in here and think it's a free ride, man, because we're going to get your money. That's the point. Where is freedom when you owe the government every day of your life? That's not free. You might as well go back to the king, for crying out loud.
1-800-347-9829. Let's open the phone lines up. Your comments, your questions. What do you think of this, folks? Do you have any questions about it? 1-800-347-9829. Dan Eastman is getting wound up. He's been wound up the last couple weeks. Of course, these are all big issues. We all should be wound up about it, quite frankly, when you think about it. I've been wound up about them for years. I think Eastman has too, and I think many of you have as well. You knew we were being cheated and robbed. We knew people were becoming multimillionaires off the government. Phone lines open.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Melissa and I have been taking Bella Grace, this powerful elixir, since last fall, 2023. The results have been amazing. My hands would crack and bleed, deep cuts and cracks every winter for years. No matter what we did, we couldn't get them to stop cracking and bleeding. This year, I took Bella Grace, no cracking, no bleeding. My acid reflux, gone. Haven't had to take a Pepsid. My hair growth, the last 2 times I had my hair cut, the lady had to use thinning shears on my hair. That's amazing. We've also received incredible feedback from you, our listening audience, and the impact it's had for you. This is loaded with astaxanthin. That's a powerful antioxidant. Collagen, but top grade collagen. Studies show 95% of it is being absorbed in the body because of the way they develop it. Then we have something called cat's claw. That's an anti-inflammatory from a vine in Peru. It's the bark, and it's an anti-inflammatory. There are about 80 clinical trials on Bella Grace. Please get a subscription now and save. MelissaHousebg.com.
All right, welcome back. Glad you're with us. I think we got an interview. I think I have an interview coming up with your U.S. Senator as well, Ron Johnson. So we'll make sure we bring some of that to you guys here as well. We're going to go to the phone lines, 1-800-347-9829, 1-800-347-9829. When I say you're a U.S. Senator, I'm talking about the folks in Wisconsin, just to clarify. 1-800-347-9829. Now, I want to go to your phone lines real quick here, but one quick question for Dan. Dan, I got to have you be real careful, though, because we're on a lot of non-com stations here. We don't endorse candidates on these stations, so I don't want to endorse anybody. But I do want people to know their civic duty and right to go and vote. And you have a very important state Supreme Court race coming up, do you not?
Well, we do. There's an April 1st election. Our Supreme Court justices are elected as nonpartisan. They don't run Republican or Democrat. They're nonpartisan. And of course, by law, the candidates amazingly can't even campaign. They have to have others campaign for them. It's sort of an interesting twist, but it tries to keep the judges above reproach. But it's a very important election. And of course, the others who are campaigning for the judges have very strong opinions about our nonpartisan judges and are pouring lots and lots of money into that race. And it's unfortunate because when you look at the amount of out-of-state money that's coming in and their ability to run ads and campaign, it becomes clear that Wisconsin citizens don't control the election of their nonpartisan judges. Our judges are elected to 10-year terms in this state. And it becomes really concerning because the people who want to get their viewpoint across on the bench are able to support candidates that they feel would be sympathetic to their viewpoint, and that rubs the whole nonpartisan the wrong way. So what we've done is we've politicized this race through proxy by other organizations donating money to candidates, and then it becomes a nuclear arms race with respect to campaign contributions, and the candidate with the most money can run the most ads and internet stuff and get their candidate elected. And of course, we've seen a shift in our court from a very stable court to a court that now seems to overturn itself within 18 months. This is a really troubling thing for those of us who've been in the law for decades. We understand that stare decisis is a critical component in the law. And what that means is judicial precedent and opinions build upon themselves over centuries. The Anglo-American law, 600 years of jurisprudence. And when a court overturns itself, it's a serious thing. Like when the Supreme Court overturned itself on school segregation or now Roe v. Wade, that was another overturning, but it took 45 years to do it. Here in Wisconsin, we're seeing, the court overturning itself in 18 months because of an ideological shift, and that becomes a real problem. So it's important for Wisconsinites to pay attention, turn off the sports, pay attention to the race, and understand, do you want a strict constructionist candidate, or do you want a progressive candidate that has a progressive view and looks at the bench as a super legislative tool to overrule what our state legislature and governor have signed into law, and suddenly now a bench can overturn that on grounds that are at least publicly causing concern in the state of Wisconsin. It's a very important race, and it really matters who you elect, because if the state Supreme Court can overrule the legislature and the governor that's how democracy works. We have a legislature and the governor signs into law. But if the court can come along, and there's only 7 members on our court, and they say, we don't like that law. That's no good. We're going to do it this way instead. That destroys democracy. We have no democracy if there's a super veto power sitting on a bench, and that becomes a real problem. So it pays to pay attention to these Supreme Court races. Some states the governor appoints. We have 10-year terms, which in my opinion, 5 years is probably enough. We ought to do them every 5 years. But the point is we have an election coming up where the ideological bend of the court shifted about 2 years ago, and it very well could be maintained, or it could shift back.
And this, by the way, is important to everybody listening, because if they make wrong decisions related to redistricting in your state, for instance, now it's going to impact the House. If they make rulings based on elections, now it's going to impact the federal races. Again, it's going to impact the House, the Senate. particularly going to impact the House, but then it's going to impact the presidential election. And we know Wisconsin is a major swing state. So anyone listening today say, I really don't care about what's going on in Wisconsin with your state Supreme Court. Well, you do need to care because it will impact federal elections, including the race for the White House. Let's go to the calls real quick. 1-800-347-9829. Your thoughts, your comments, your questions. Also, what do you hope President Trump will talk about tonight in his joint session before Congress? And what would you encourage him to talk about? What do you think he's going to talk about? 1-800-347-9829. Kevin in Minnesota, line 1. Hi, Kevin. Thanks for calling in.
Hey, Brandon. Thank you. I wonder, regarding the clip of Trudeau you played, I wonder how many Canadians are actually angry. In 2020, I had some equipment for sale, and I had several Canadian potential buyers calling, asking about it, and the conversation quickly turned to, the COVID-19 lockdowns and restrictions and mandates, and they were quite hopeless what was going on there and the freedoms that they quickly lost. And more than once they said, I just sure hope President Trump can do something about this. I mean, they were wishing they were on the other side of that border at that time, seeing what, Trump was. We still had a glimmer of freedom here, which they had lost seemingly all of it up there. So
yes,
I just wonder how accurate that anger really is.
I think you make a very good point, Kevin. I really do. Thank you for the call. Kevin in Minnesota. Ray, line 2, Ray from Kansas. Thanks for calling in, Ray.
Hello?
Yes, sir. Go right ahead. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I've got actually two. One, mandatory car insurance. Our economy tanked as soon as this happened, and they called it a recession or whatever. And no one's talking about this. You see cars with there's crap hanging off of them, no brakes, no tail lights, no windshield wipers. People can't afford to drive their cars. Just putting their horse in front of the cart. Someone like myself, I'm residentially challenged. I cannot afford to drive because I can buy a car for $200, but I got to pay, upwards of $1,000 a year. That's $40,000 over the course of a lifetime to drive this thing. Second, why can't they do away with the FBI and get a central police agency? Because I've had a major celebrity stalker, which is the reason I'm out here. And every time I call them, they act like that's no thing. You get these celebrities go to prison for major stuff because they're used to getting by with it, and they just hang up on you. No, we don't take their report for that. Thank you very much. I'll go back to my phone here, or my headphones. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you, Ray. Okay, let's go to the issue of mandatory insurance, Dan. What is your take on that? Because here's part of the problem, though. Have you ever been in a wreck? Have you ever been rear-ended by somebody that didn't have insurance? I mean, part of the problem is if you're going to drive a car, you should have to maintain the insurance. Now, I do understand, again, part of the problem is you get your car, you pay it off, and you still got to pay for the privilege to drive with insurance. But at the same time, if someone runs over your car, tears your car up, then they don't have any insurance. Your insurance has to pay for it. Now your rates are going up. Where do you stand on this issue of mandatory insurance for cars?
Well, it's an interesting problem. Keep in mind, you have the right to walk or run, maybe or skip or maybe hop, but you do not have a right to operate a motor vehicle. It's a license, and that means there has to be some competency test, and there's also a financial responsibility. If you're going to operate a car and you hurt somebody and you're negligent under tort law, you will be responsible for compensating the person you injured. The problem is if the person doesn't have any money, then the injured person doesn't recover. So states by policy have the power to say, as long as if you're going to give you a license to operate a motor vehicle, you have to have liability insurance. So they don't usually want comprehensive and all the fancy stuff, but at least there's liability insurance. And the states have the right to do that. They can put that in place where not only do you have to take a test and you have to have a license, you have to renew the license, you have to pay a fee, of course, but you also have to have liability insurance. And that's a decision we make at the state level. It's got nothing to do with the federal government. It's a state decision. And that brings power back to the states. So while there are certain people, and I think, the caller, he makes a good point, that it's a lot of money. But if you look at the paycheck you're bringing home, or if you have a small business, you're looking at how much you're paying in taxes. If those taxes were lower, you'd have a little more leeway to pay that liability insurance and be a good neighbor. Yeah. And the problem is there's not enough money. That's the problem. And I think that goes back to the economics of we can't afford to even live under a system where you can have an automobile which requires liability insurance because there's no money, you're not making enough money. And I think that's what President Trump needs to address tonight to the American people. We need to get you making money there shouldn't be income tax on anybody making less than $1 million a year. We're all filing our taxes right now, and at the burden of rounding up all this paperwork and everybody's got to give everybody a form. It's a joke. The whole thing is a burdensome joke. So the average American who's just trying to make a living, get by, you shouldn't even be thinking about income taxes. You want to tax people. Tax the higher income. It's the original thing was 1913. Oh, tax those guys making $1 million. Well, let's go back to that. Those are $1913. I'd settle for that.
Well, yeah, of course, $1 million then.
I have money.
$1 million then, wow.
Yeah, that was a lot of money back in those days.
Yeah, and of course, then we go to the issue of your homeowners insurance. Have any of you checked your homeowners insurance rates lately? Some of my audience is texting and emailing with me and saying, my insurance on my home has gone up 40% in 1 year. The insurance on my house has gone up 40%. So you talk about your car insurance, your property insurance, your contents insurance, your life insurance, your health insurance. You're right. The American people at some point are like, we don't have enough to maintain all this because we're having to give so much to the corrupt government who ends up using it for enriching their friends and giving it to terrorist groups and LGBTQ agenda and all this other garbage, right? Yeah, well said. Barbara, line 4 from Kansas. Hi, Barbara. Thanks for calling in.
How are you today?
Good. Thank you, Barbara.
Well, I just wanted to tell you, I am so proud of America for waking up. America is awake. That doesn't mean we've solved everything, but we are certainly awake. And so I say to Canada, grow up, Canada. And I say to Zelensky, grow up. We're not playing your little stupid games anymore. And all of these NGOs, like Pelosi and Schumer and Hillary and Obama and Soros and Gates, grow up. We're not giving you any more of our money. We're done with you people.
I love it, Barbara. Hey, let me ask the attorney here, Dan. She brings great points, but they got the money. You know the term. I'm sure some of our audience know the term, clawback. Is it not time for clawback on some of these people? We talked about a federal judge last week that's part of an NGO that gets millions of dollars. Stacey Abrams' group, supposedly, millions and millions and millions, and maybe even billions. But at some point, where's the clawback? You're going to start paying it back, or we're going to start repossessing your assets. What about clawback to the American taxpayer?
Well, I think that's an important concept. Now, keep in mind, all these NGOs and all the people who make $1 million a year running the NGOs and are stuffing their bank accounts, that was all legal. It was all legal under what Congress approved. Nobody's looting the Treasury, they're not sneaking into Fort Knox and walking off with the gold. That was legal. And it's really important to understand the power of this Doge technology to see. And that's why if you were the beneficiary of an NGO and you're stuffing $30 million in your Swiss bank account, you rest assured that that technology knows it and they can track those dollars. They know exactly where they live because this technology has been used in the terrorism fight and in the drug dealing fight and in all of these money laundering and offshore stuff. This is not new. It's just new to the federal government. So when you look at like the lady who just called, she's really outraged about this idea that these people were, pretty high, living pretty high off the hog there at tall hogs at the trough when the rest of us are scrimping to get by, like the poor fellow who's complaining about his liability insurance. That's the dichotomy. And this is the stuff of which social revolution is made. People are waking up and say, hey, you know what? They can't be the haves based on the federal trough and the rest of us going broke.
Let's come back to that with Dan Eastman right after the break. We have a first-time caller. I think we're also going to have Congressman Glenn Grotham on tonight as well on Worldview Tube to talk about the joint session of Congress tonight. So tune in for that. We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. I want to thank you for all your support at wvwfoundation.com that helps make possible pushing out 24/7 content for free. Without your support, we'd have to put it all behind a paywall. But thanks to you and your support through our foundation, we're able to push it out for free as a broadcast service and broadcast ministry of WVW Foundation. Please consider going there and setting up an automatic monthly contribution, or go there and make an occasional contribution. If you prefer to support us through the mail, you'll find our mailing address there at wvwfoundation.com. You can also call and make your contribution over the phone by calling 901-825-0652. That's 901-825-0652. Again, all these details are available at wvwfoundation.com. Thank you for your support as we try to help people around the world understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview.
All right, welcome back. Glad you're with us. Worldview Radio, our website, worldviewradio.com. And don't forget, stay tuned for Crosstalk coming up at 2 p.m. Central here on the VCY America Radio Network. And if you are not able to pick up a VCY terrestrial station in your market, you can hear them at vcy.org, vcy.org. Tonight, we're going to be carrying the president's speech. We'll have commentary before, we'll have commentary after. And I think we're going to have Congressman Glenn Grotham on either before or after, or both. And I think we also have an interview with, tomorrow, I think I might bring you some of the interview that I'll be doing this afternoon with U.S. Senator Ron Johnson, also of the state of Wisconsin. So we're busy boys around here, that's for sure. Let's go back to your phone calls, 1-800-347-9829, 1-800-347-9829. We have Maxine, line 4. First-time caller. Maxine, thanks for calling in.
Yes, well, thank you, first of all, for having Dan Eastman. We need a new governor. Maybe Dan needs to get into politics. But my question was, for those of us on Social Security, how are we going to benefit by the tariffs? I guess we are worried that the food prices are going to go up more, and how would we benefit from the
question.
tariffs?
Great. I'm glad you called in. First-time caller from Wisconsin, Maxine. First of all, she wants you to run for governor. Have you ever considered running for office?
Well, I've spent more time running from office than for office. But I'll think about it. I'll thank you. I've got one, or you and I, that's 2 votes. I think.
There you go. There you go.
But no, I think she raises a good point. I talk about the Social Security situation, and of course, everybody on Social Security got a big 2.5% raise this year, which was really a slap in the face. Now, of course, there's a formula, the Consumer Price Index calculations, and the Social Security Administration is required to use that formula, and they give a raise at 2.5%. But we know inflation in the economy, if you look at government statistics, is 3.5%, other than the CPI. And if you look at your own checkbook, you realize that inflation is running a lot higher. So what happens in an inflationary economy is that people on a fixed income, and that's what Social Security and pensions are, you're slipping behind with buying power. So what you start to do is you shift. Instead of maybe shopping at the I won't mention any brand names here, but in Wisconsin, I don't know, the expensive grocery store versus, let's say, an Aldi's, you're going to make substitution shifts to try and preserve your buying power as prices go up and your income is fixed. And that's the big problem with fixed income Americans. And there are many in this baby boom generation where inflation is like when the flood comes into the harbor, when the tide rises, a rising tide floats all ships. But if your ship is tethered to the bottom of the harbor, you're underwater. And that's the real problem that a lot of Americans are facing. And that's one of the things I think President Trump has to deal with. Now, he's talking about no tax on Social Security, which is a very good thing for a lot of elderly people. No tax on tips. That's another good thing because lower income people tend to be in the service industry, and that's another good thing. But if you're shifting that tax burden to people in the middle of their careers making money, you're really shifting the burden. What I'm saying is you should lower the burden dramatically. And that's where I think eliminating the income tax for everybody who makes less than $1 million, pick a number, $1 million, will liberate the American populace. No more tax returns, no more W-2s, no more withholding, no more worried about tax on tip, no more anything. You say, if you make $1, you keep $1, and you get to spend that dollar or invest that dollar as you see fit. That will liberate the American people. Instead of liberating the Ukrainians, how about liberating the American people so that they can get on with their lives? We built this country, and we at least deserve to be able to keep our money and spend it as seeing fit. Why do you penalize the great masses of Americans, all of whom work for a living or run small businesses, to support a monstrosity that funds global shenanigans with tax dollars, borrowed dollars, and is responsive to nobody. Now, you can have Glenn Grothman on. He's my congressman. I love the guy. He's a great friend. His mom lives about 6 houses down from me. He's a good, you know how you can tell Glenn's a good guy? Because he goes to Washington and he comes back poorer than he left. He's one of the few. He's one of the very few that didn't go to Washington and make zillions of dollars. That's how you know Glenn's a good guy. But, when you think about it from that perspective, that's my one touch at Congress. I send one guy, and I happen to know him, but, it's like 166,000 people per congressional district, and you don't really have a voice in Washington. They have all the power to take, and they have all the power to borrow and spend, but the people don't have any real power over Washington. I mean, you can't even get the simplest we're trying to deal with daylight savings time. This is a national crisis. They've been debating daylight savings time for over 10 years. Let alone funding the next terrorist or the next invasion of some country. This is a real problem.
Yeah, let's go to Bruce. Bruce, South Dakota, line 1. Thanks for calling in, Bruce.
Yeah, thanks for taking the call. You guys are talking about all these tax cuts and everything, and I know Doge was talking about sending everybody a check, and sending everybody money seems, first off, not everybody's paid anything, so some people would get something that they didn't really deserve.
I agree.
I think they ought to take that and go for the debt, and then I think a lot of this waste they found will help out a lot of the programs that we do maybe still have to have, like Social Security and Medicare, but we got to get the debt controlled before anything is going to work out in our favor.
Great call, Bruce. Great call. Let me go real quick to Joseph in Pennsylvania, line 2. Hi, Joseph. Thanks for calling in.
Hi.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear Dan Eastman's fired up today. I listen to him, and he's usually pretty calm, but I'm really glad he's fired up about taxes. The one bad thing nobody's emphasizing too much, Walmart gets cheap goods from overseas, and the people are not making money because of the way the wages are set up. So Walmart is not going to have any more cheap goods to sell cheap to people, so it's going to hurt a lot of poor people. Yeah,
okay,
no, it's not.
Let me get a quick comment from Dan before I run out of time. You want to comment on that real quick, Dan?
Well, it is a problem of shifting, but we made that shift in the Clinton administration with NAFTA and then outsourcing our production. And of course, everybody in America said, we're going to shift our production to China and overseas because we can make it so much cheaper and bring it back in and sell it so much cheaper and we'll capture market share. And the Americans went for that. Said, I'd rather spend 40% less made in China than I would made in America. And American industry was just dying. So now we're going to have a rebalancing. And yes, there will be pressure and pain. Unfortunately, there's no free lunch. So we're going to have to look at that and see how that best balances out. But if you weren't paying income taxes, it wouldn't matter if the prices went up 10%.
That's exactly right. Joseph from Pennsylvania, thanks for calling. Dan Eastman, it's ProfessorEastman.com, ProfessorEastman.com. Stay tuned for Crosstalk. Take care.
This has been...
And that's our broadcast on those stations. We're back with WROS and with Worldview Tube. Dan, let me bring up what Bruce said, because I've heard a couple of people say, we should put that money toward paying off the debt. Here's the problem I have with that, though. And I do agree that every American shouldn't get a check, because a lot of Americans didn't pay in any taxes, so they shouldn't be getting any money. They shouldn't get $5,000 in the mail to put in the bank, and they didn't even pay anything in. But the idea of, let's put that money toward the debt, the problem I have is the American taxpayer always gets paid back last. Well, let's put it toward the debt. Let's put it toward the debt. No, the taxpayer needs relief now. And so he does make a good comment, though, about people who will get a check who haven't paid in. And yet at the same time, they have paid in with the hidden tax of inflation. So even if they didn't pay in taxes, they do pay in the hidden tax of inflation, which now I'm kind of arguing against myself, and that maybe indeed they do deserve the $5,000 check because they have been paying taxes. It's just a hidden tax of inflation. Break it down for me.
Well, here and President Bush II did this very same thing.
Right, after 9/11.
Checks in 2007. And here's the thing. You give somebody $5,000, they run over to the big box, they buy themselves a big screen TV made in China, and the money goes overseas, we get the big screen TV and it's in the landfill. It does nothing for the American economy. The bigger problem, and this is when you really look at the situation, when Obama said that we're going to fundamentally change America, nobody really knew what that meant. But if you think about it, if you run us broke and you rack up the debts to the point where you can't pay it back, you have fundamentally changed the economy of the United States. Now, keep in mind, when you look at how the United States ended up with the great state of Alaska, which is almost as big as Canada, the Tsar of Russia, they spent themselves broke. And they had to sell Alaska to the United States, or I think back in the day it was like $7 million, Stewart's Folly, Stewart's Icebox. We bought that to bail the Tsar out because he went broke, okay? And as a result, the Tsar still collapsed, the Bolsheviks still took over, but we got Alaska on the cheap. What would happen if the United States, in order to get out from under the $38 trillion in debt, and keep in mind, the debt service on that $38 trillion is $1 trillion a year. What would happen if we'd have to sell Alaska to the Chinese or California to the Chinese to get out of debt? Now, people laugh about that. But, President Trump is talking about Greenland and, taking over Canada. But this is how the world game is played. And we are in so deep on our national debt at $38 trillion. That is an unfathomable amount of money with a debt service that keeps on going. And the libs will say, well, we owe it to ourselves. No, you don't. Every last federal bond issued, that $38 trillion, is on somebody's balance sheet as an asset. Your pension fund, your 401k, your IRA, it's in your bank. It's the Chinese have $1 trillion, the Japanese have $1.2 trillion, the Europeans have. This is real money. How do you pay that back? 5 generations to bring that back to where it was in 1975 after we paid off World War II. It took 30 years to pay off World War II. From 1945 to 1975, we were at 25% of GDP, okay? Now we're like 128% of GDP. It will take generations to pay that back. We're broke. And there are alternatives, one uglier than the next. But when you look at Zimbabwe or old-time Germany, anybody in Venezuela with massive hyperinflation, that is the outcome of political lack of courage that results from dealing with printing more money, printing more zeros. And that's what that lady was talking about. And that's what some of your callers were talking about, is that there is no simple solution. And we are at a cross point in the United States. And that's why, these Doge guys really understand that. They're talking about trying to find $2 trillion in savings over 2 years, okay? Well, we're running a $2.5 trillion deficit this year. And then this bill that just passed the House, over 10 years, we're going to cut spending by $2 trillion over 10 years. We're going to have a $2 trillion deficit this year. This is an unfixable problem. In order to fix this problem, you're going to have to become extremely creative with the Federal Reserve System, or you're going to have to start thinking about selling California to the Chinese or something. I mean, this is not an academic discussion. This is getting to be real. And the people that called you over one at a time are telling you the same thing. We don't have enough money to live. We don't have enough money to live. And this is our federal government. It's not your state. Your state didn't do this to you. Your county didn't do it to you. Your municipality didn't do it to you. The federal government of the United States did this to the people of the United States. We let them do it. We let them do it.
Dan Eastman, his website is professoreastman.com, professoreastman.com, and he airs each and every day at 11:30 Central, right?
That's right, 11:30 Central, 11:30 to 12, Monday through Friday.
Monday through Friday, live, 11:30 Central, worldviewtube.com, 12:30 Eastern Standard. Thank you, Professor.
Okay, thanks for having me on, Brad. It's always great talking to you.
And I think the professor is going to make an appearance on April 15th as well, folks, at the Waukesha Expo Center, along with Congressman Glenn Grotham. Hope you're registered. Tickets are free, but you better get registered. Worldviewtube.com/events, worldviewtube.com/events. If you're a Vault member, you'll be able to live stream it, but only if you're a Vault member. That's available at worldviewtube.com/vault. Remember, full coverage tonight. Take care.
Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
And finally, as you all saw yesterday, a federal judge denied the Associated Press's emergency motion for a temporary restraining order against myself, our Deputy Chief of Staff Taylor Budowich, and our Chief of Staff Susie Wiles for our decision to remove the Associated Press from the White House press pool for certain and special events. The judge's ruling upholding our decision to deny the Associated Press such privileged access reinforces the truth, and it reiterates what I said from this podium last week when that suit was filed. Asking the President of the United States questions in limited spaces such as the Oval Office and Air Force One is a privilege that unfortunately has only been granted to a few. It is not a legal right for all. The Trump administration has already proven to be the most transparent ever, and this president the most accessible in history. This is evidenced by President Trump's daily press conferences in the Oval Office, where he takes many questions from the journalists who have the honor and privilege of standing before the beautiful Resolute desk. The President and this entire White House are committed to ensuring the American people continue to receive this same level of historic transparency, access, and visibility. In fact, we want to double down and give even greater access to the American people. We want more outlets and new outlets to have a chance to take part in the press pool, to cover this administration's unprecedented achievements up close, front and center. As you all know, for decades, a group of DC-based journalists, the White House Correspondents Association, has long dictated which journalists get to ask questions of the President of the United States in these most intimate spaces. Not anymore. I am proud to announce that we are going to give the power back to the people who read your papers, who watch your television shows, and who listen to your radio stations. Moving forward, the White House press pool will be determined by the White House press team. Legacy outlets who have participated in the press pool for decades will still be allowed to join, fear not, but we will also be offering the privilege to well-deserving outlets who have never been allowed to share in this awesome responsibility. Just like we added a new media seat in this briefing room, legacy media outlets who have been here for years will still participate in the pool, but new voices are going to be welcomed in as well. As part of these changes, we will continue the rotation amongst the 5 major television networks to ensure the President's remarks are heard far and wide around this world. We will add additional streaming services which reach different audiences than traditional cable and broadcast. This is the ever-changing landscape of the media in the United States today. We will continue to...
America needs a return of the free press. Welcome back to Transition Tuesday. We'll keep calling it that until the Trump administration's fully in place. Well, the Rob Maness Show is live on Worldview Tube. Our X Space is simulcast Rumble, YouTube, Truth Social Plus, Amazon Fire, and Roku. Press Secretary Carolina Leavitt there announced last Tuesday in that video that the White House has taken control over the makeup of the White House press pool, brushing aside the liberal White House Correspondents Association. The WHCA provided a laughable response to that, screeching that the move is an attack on a free and independent press. Consider those words in the context of what we've learned about the USAID scandal and its funding of American media outlets for the specific purpose of influencing American society. Yes, hundreds of millions of your tax dollars being given to press outlets like the Associated Press and Reuters and Politico, so you get the government message. The rot and corruption are much deeper than you realize, however. Outlets like Reuters and AP are heavily involved in how much access independent and legacy media outlets most use content like the Presidential Press Pool video live stream and breaking news content that they produce. My guest today is here to discuss the treatment his independent media company has received at the hands of these government propaganda outlets from firsthand experience. We'll also discuss tonight's biggest breaking news today, the presidential address to Congress. It's a State of the Union address. Let's go ahead and call it that, because my guest is a newsman. CEO of Worldview, Brandon House, is my guest today. Brandon's the author of more than 16 books, a senior media chief executive officer who has led groundbreaking efforts such as launching and operating Lindell TV with Mike Lindell. His documentary films are world-renowned. He's a legendary Christian and family radio broadcaster, and his venture in digital broadcasting here at Worldview Tube is breaking new ground in the independent media ecosystem. Brandon, welcome to the Rob Maness Show for the very first time. We appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me on, Colonel. Appreciate it.
All right, you just got off of what, 2 hours of radio?
I just did an hour of radio. We do about 4 hours of live programming here a day. Last week they had me at the news desk for 6 hours, the boys did, without letting me stand up. 6 hours. I told them it's elder abuse. That's approaching elder abuse.
Well, if it was me, I'm 63. It would definitely be elder abuse. My goodness, that's a long time. Well, Worldview Tube it's not new, right? It's been around a while. You've been working in this business since, what, 1990-ish?
Yeah, I started my public speaking in 1990, my first book in public speaking in 1990, then started doing radio as a guest regularly in 1993 with my first book. I was doing radio before that, but I mean, I started going into big radio in 93 with Michael Reagan, Oliver North, G. Gordon Liddy, Ken Hamlin. And then from there, I sat in for Michael Reagan for the first time in 1995. The first show I ever hosted solo, not where I wasn't a guest, actually the host, for 3 hours. And I did that for him many times, became his regular guest host, sat in for him when he was away at his dad's funeral for President Reagan. And then in 96, I got picked up by a network in Milwaukee to start doing guest hosting and regular programming for them. And I'm still with that same network 29 years later, and that's the 74 terrestrial stations I just got off of. And then in 2006, I started Worldview Tube. So we were asked to start a TV show for a network that just got a channel on DirecTV. They called up and said, we'd like to have an hour show once a week on Worldview. And so I started that show, and that's when I also started Worldview Tube in 2006.
Well, and now it's a network that has 24-hour live streaming on channels like Roku or I'm sorry, on
Rumble,
Roku,
all kinds of stuff.
All of those, and we're truly an independent broadcasting, digital broadcasting outlet. We're doing some unique things that have been copied by networks like InfoWars, like what we're doing right now on this show is the X Spaces simulcast with a live audience. I even saw Charlie Kirk do it on his live stream broadcast a week ago or so. So I don't know that he got the idea from us, but we're going to take credit for it here at Worldview Tube Network. Well, Brandon, you and I had a conversation about how the network is trying to make inroads and get our correspondent in D.C. A seat at the table in the White House press corps. And this discussion of, that you were telling me some facts about how they've treated us. I wanted to do a show on this to get it documented because it's just really, it's abominable what we're seeing with the press in the 21st century. And maybe it's bleed over from the 20th century too, but I used to believe in a free press the way it's laid out in the First Amendment, that it's basically the watchdog on government for the American people. But this White House Correspondents Association seems to be a non-government organization that's a watchdog for the left now to make sure they get their best job. Is that an accurate depiction?
I think it is. I don't want the guys to show my computer screen because I don't want to give away people's private information. But let me just read to you the letter that I received. We applied to belong to the White House Press Corps Association, the White House Correspondents Association. I went online, filled out the information, paid the money for the annual dues, and waited for my application to be approved or rejected. First of all, I got an email, kind of a snide email. I wish you guys could learn to follow instructions. We said we needed a letter from your supervisor, to which I replied in the email to the guy, that's a real problem. I'm the CEO of the company and founder. I don't have a supervisor. How would you like to proceed from here? He never responded. So I find it a little odd that they're so apparently unaware of how corporations run that a CEO would want to apply for himself and his company, and they somehow are asking me for a letter from my supervisor. So a little lame on their part. Then they didn't even respond when I asked, well, how would you like to go from here, since I am the founder and CEO? I could have one of my guys in the control room apply and then give them the letter, being that I'm their supervisor. They clearly weren't interested, I don't think, in us belonging. So they apparently just took the application as it was without responding back to me. They could have said, hey, we're going to take it as it is and we'll let you know. They didn't even respond. Then out of the blue, I get a letter back on February 18th. Let me read it to you. This is from the Executive Director, White House Correspondents Association. I regret to inform you that your application for membership has been declined. Your application was carefully reviewed by a committee of journalists looking at your listed news organization and your assignment based on all of the information you provided and any other information they found available. They did not see evidence that you are employed on the editorial staff of a newspaper, periodical, wire service, radio, TV, or other news gathering organization that reports on the White House as required by our bylaws. I will refund your dues payment, end quote. Well, here you go. I responded saying, apparently you didn't look very hard as I report on the White House every night. Yeah, every night we have a show with Neil McCabe, who was a White House reporter, who at one time belonged to the White House Correspondents Association. If they went to worldviewtube.com, they would have clearly seen what we do. We have a second player there where whenever President Trump speaks, we do our best to carry it from the White House. Okay? So they clearly didn't do their homework, or they're not being fully honest, or they're just clueless. Or they just don't want us to belong, which I think, in my opinion, that's the kicker. Now, we, of course, would like to belong to the press pool. We would be more than happy to talk to them about providing a cameraman. To be a part of the pool, we would like to see your guy get vetted by the Secret Service, fill out the information, which I've done several times. I'm sure you've done, Colonel. Logan's done it multiple times. We've been at Mar-a-Lago. If they would have gone on our website and done any research, they would have seen us conducting interviews with President Trump at Mar-a-Lago. So we would be happy to go through that process and say, okay, you need to have a cameraman available on X weekend, the third weekend of the month, or whatever it is, or this day or this week, and we're going to share the responsibility of covering the White House or the president. Should he go from the White House to Camp David or Mar-a-Lago or wherever, we got to have our people ready to, stream what's going on. Fine. Tell us. Yeah. Tell us when and where. We'll make a budget for it. We were never given options. We kept inquiring of options. We're willing to help pay the dues and the cost of a pool camera guy. No, I don't think they want us involved. And then we go to Reuters and we're like, hey, what's it cost to buy some streams from you guys? I think the cost was around $1,300 a month. Are you ready for the kicker on this one? $1,300 a month to pull, different things going on. Footage that we had for hours of the Potomac as they were trying to pull the plane out of the Potomac that went down. Tragedy, right? And we used some of it, and we covered some of that. Great footage. Thank you, Reuters. Happy to get it. Pool footage. And then there might be something going on in Gaza and a pool camera there. Thank you. Happy to use that. Right. But then when it came to getting stuff from the White House, Colonel, there would be something there. And what was the way it was worded, Logan? U.S. restricted? U.S. restricted. Why? If I pay you $1,300 a month, why should I be U.S. restricted from footage of President Trump speaking from the Oval Office or inside the White House? Then I find out these companies and news groups got millions, some of them millions, of dollars in taxpayer money. And now you're going to tell me you're going to take my tax-paying dollars and my audience tax-paying dollars. You're going to charge me $1,300 a month to get your pool feed. Then you're going to exclude me from the pool feed coming out of the White House when you're basically now, in my opinion, a quasi-utility taking government money. This is garbage.
Exactly right. Well, Brandon, we got to take a commercial break real quick. When we come back, I want to continue that conversation and get your thoughts on the White House's control over this and whether that's going to be better or worse or stay the same. And get your continued thoughts on the funding using government tax dollars of these media outlets that are restricting the use of the independent press and availability of that so that we can report on it accurately. We'll be right back with the CEO of Worldview 2, Brandon House, right here on The Rob Maness Show.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. I want to thank you for all your support at wvwfoundation.com that helps make possible pushing out 24/7 content for free. Without your support, we'd have to put it all behind a paywall. But thanks to you and your support through our foundation, we're able to push it out for free as a broadcast service and broadcast ministry of WVW Foundation. Please consider going there and setting up an automatic monthly contribution, or go there and make an occasional contribution. If you prefer to support us through the mail, you'll find our mailing address there at wvwfoundation.com. You can also call and make your contribution over the phone by calling 901-825-0652. That's 901-825-0652. Again, all these details are available at wvwfoundation.com. Thank you for your support as we try to help people around the world understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview.
USAID outflows to mainstream media outlets like Politico, or to Reuters, for example. I mentioned that there's $300 million in grants that were given by the Biden administration from various government agencies to Reuters, while Reuters won a Pulitzer for Reuters was the tip of the spear for all anti-Trump reporting, and they won a Pulitzer in the year 2024 for their series on Elon Musk and malfeasance by Elon Musk and his companies at all of his different portfolio companies, Tesla, Neuralink, SpaceX, X. At the same time that Biden from the White House had asked the U.S. government, had replied to reporters that regulators should look into Elon Musk, and that 11 different U.S. government regulatory bodies and agencies were pursuing adverse action against all four of those very agencies that Reuters won its Pulitzer for writing hit pieces about.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. Yes, we need a free press here in the United States of America. It's essential to the way our government is supposed to work. It's essential to protecting the rights of the American people. And quite honestly, it's failing. It's been failing for quite some time. That was Mr. Mike Benz on the Sean Ryan Show talking about these American media outlets getting hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayer funding in order to do what? To get government messaging out that is opposed to the American people, to try to take down Donald Trump, to try to take down Elon Musk, to massage that messaging to the American people. It's a propaganda effort is what it is. It's not only wrong, it's unethical, it's illegal. And my guest today is the CEO of Worldview 2, Brandon House. We're talking about how the White House Correspondents Association has treated our independent media outlet, and whether we think we can get into the White House press corps again, because we have a D.C. correspondent. You mentioned him, Brandon, in the first segment, Neil McCabe, who's been a member of the WHCA. Has the press secretary's office set new rules now to maybe we have a better opportunity to get our presence in there?
Well, they have, and that was a great speech by the press secretary that you played at the beginning of your broadcast. The issue is when I think we were getting great communication with the White House press office, communications office, before they made the announcement of their website address where people could apply. We were having great conversation, communication. They sent us the paperwork. We filled it out. The Secret Service background for me, for Logan. Any of our guys could fill out. You could fill out, which would begin the process for hard passes for us to be there at press briefings or to go there for special occasions and report from the White House front lawn or from Pebble Beach, as they call it. That's historically what they've called it. For those who don't know, they have an area set out in front of the White House. If you're looking at the White House to the right on the driveway there, and it traditionally had a bunch of small pebbles there because they were wearing the grass down. So they kind of got the nickname Pebble Beach many, many years ago. And you could set up there and do hits from there with your network. That was all going great. And then when they announced that they were opening it up to everybody that wanted to apply, which we appreciated, we understood within a few hours they had 10,000 requests. I think that has now been such an overwhelming number that now it's very difficult to get the response that we're needing from the communications office and the White House press office. So we're waiting for things to kind of flesh out, this flood of inquiries to settle down and pick it back up. So that's what's going on right now. But I will tell you, without naming the network, because I'm not at liberty to say, a major conservative network we talked with them, they talked with us, we've worked together, we've shared assets and production and worked together. And we were talking about the problem that we were having, and the individual said, we're having the same issue. This was before Caroline made the comment about the White House Press Corps Association that you read this week, or played this week. I told him about our letter that we were circulating to key people tied to President Trump. And this individual, this network said, will you send that over to me? I'd like to circulate that as well. So I kind of detailed what I told you guys here on this show. I put that in a letter, circulated it around, sent it to that network, and other networks in the conservative world were having the same problem. Then when about a week later, 10 days later, here comes Caroline with her statement. So the good news is, I don't know if any of them saw my letter. I'm not taking credit for that. I'm not saying that. But I will say we're not the only one that's been receiving this kind of issue. And I think it finally percolated up. We had a great announcement as you played it by her. We'll see what continues to unfold. But the press, the White House Press Corps Association, the powers that be, I don't think they're happy at all about the new media. And reality is, go look at the ratings of MSNBC and CNN. I think there are nights that our numbers and weeks that our numbers, I think they'd like to have some of those, or we're not far off. I mean, it's amazing. Some of the, it's not uncommon for us to have 1 million views in a 24-hour period. That's not uncommon.
Yeah, exactly right. MSNBC's been firing people left and right, too. Big names here recently. CNN's already gone through a lot of that, too. But you think they're trying to come back to a more centrist presentation, get some of the audience?
I think they are, and you see that Bezos is, I guess going to open it up and pushing for more individual liberty, economic liberty. And I find it very interesting all of a sudden that even some conservative so-called publications are wanting to call him a libertarian. Let me just warn the audience. In my book that came out, Marxianity, in 2018, I warned in 2018 in a whole chapter in that book about liberals, progressives, socialists, communitarians. Communitarianism is when you take big government and big business and merge it together. It's called communitarianism. Corporate fascism is another word. The third way is another term. I warned in that book in 2018, be very careful of the progressives who now want to call themselves libertarians. And I went and I explained why. And now you got Bezos. If you go check him out with Amazon and his Washington Post, could this guy be more involved in big government and big business merging together, and with the intelligence community and the Pentagon and the government contracts? I mean, come on. And now all of a sudden he wants to tell us he's a libertarian? I'm not buying it. But isn't it interesting now they're remaking themselves to try to, to stay afloat?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think they see what Elon Musk has been successful with, who I see as more of a libertarian type personality, but that's from observations over a long period of time, and what he's doing with the Trump administration as part of the government. As opposed to some Republicans we see who love their big government and want to see their big government and their big business be part of it together. It's very interesting how the mix gets made up and these personalities try to shift back and forth to try to meet what the public's expectations are. And really, it's very simple, isn't it, Brandon? We expect our government to be as small as possible. We expect it not to interfere with our individual rights. We expect the people operating the government not to be in it for themselves, but to be in it for public servants. And believe it or not, I see Musk as like that, but Bezos and that ilk, not even close. Not even close at all. As a matter of fact, this USAID scandal, and Mike Benz there talked about $300 million of tax dollars going to Reuters. And you mentioned the Reuters feed, the video feed. They restricted independent media from being able to use the White House stuff, which is crazy when you're paying them all that money, and they're getting paid by my tax dollars. I would think that is that should be a publicly available service, even to citizens, if they're getting that much tax dollars in order to enable themselves to do that.
100%. And we talked to a few attorneys. We talked to one guy who's argued before the Supreme Court several times and won a major case there. So yeah, we're not, we're trying to play nice and go through the process, but at some point, I don't know, it may require some legal action against some of these groups. I'm talking about, not talking about the White House, I'm talking about these press pool people, because I don't think, and again, I'm not an attorney, but I don't think you can take all this government money, turn around and sell this back to other smaller media companies, and then tell them, oh, by the way, any of the feed coming out of the White House or from the president is banned, restricted for U.S. distribution. Which apparently what that means is, Colonel, people overseas, media networks overseas can carry it, but U.S. restricted. You mean the people that don't pay taxes to the U.S. government overseas can use it, but the taxpayers in the U.S. and their viewers who do pay taxes can't use it when it's coming from a company that got reportedly millions of dollars in taxpayer money? I mean, really? No.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. Well, we got a hand up over in the audience. Let's go ahead and take that question before we go to our break. Shell, go ahead. Who's got their hand up?
We have Crazy Night, sir.
I don't really have a question, Colonel, but more of a statement. As far as free speech and the media goes and all the propaganda, it's hard to believe that they're going to spread any truth when we can't hold our own government accountable for any truth. For instance, the Epstein list. Mm-hmm. It's going to be redacted. So for me, thinking that we can't hold our government accountable for 100% disclosure, how are we going to hold the media accountable for 100% disclosure? To me, the media is controlled opposition.
Well, the legacy media definitely is. I'll let Brandon comment on this before we go to the break, but it's my view the legacy media definitely is. You're right on point there, Crazy Night. And the rise of independent media, this is my view, is important, so important, because as we rise, we need to push out the government propaganda legacy media that's taken all these tax dollars and instill ourselves with journalistic ethics, which is we maintain our independence because we're supposed to be one of the watchdogs on the government for the people to protect their rights. Brandon, go ahead.
Well, this goes back to 1933. John Dewey, the father of progressive education, went over and studied the Karl Marx way of education, the former Soviet Union, came back to America and started implementing that here. John Dewey. He helped start the American Civil Liberties Union with avowed and admitted communist Roger Baldwin. John Dewey brought a group of Marxists to America from Germany that actually had an institute known as the Marxist Institute. We call them the Frankfurt School, Frankfurt, Germany.
They came here about 1933 with the help of John Dewey, and were dropped down at Brandeis, Berkeley, Princeton, other places. I did my first seminar in the Frankfurt School at one of my conferences in November of 1997. I had that presented. November of 97, trying to explain to the American people cultural Marxism. And these guys came here and said, we're going to have a long march through the institutions, and we're going to go after two particular institutions: education and media. Education and media. Okay? And guess who helped bring these German intellectuals, these Marxists, to America with John Dewey? A young man in his early 20s by the name of Edward R. Murrow. And Edward R. Murrow, of course, rose to being on CBS radio, then television. And when someone tried to point all this out by the name of U.S. Senator Joseph McCarthy from Wisconsin, Murrow had risen in broadcasting. And he used his position in broadcasting to destroy the truth teller, Joseph McCarthy. So, what did they go after? Wow. Education and media. And we're still to this day fighting to take over and have an even playing field in the media. They don't want to give up because they've used the media to carry out their cultural Marxist revolution by doing what? Saying the source of all suffering and oppression is what? Christianity and capitalism. Yep. Christianity and the free market system. That's what they use the media to do and say. And that's why you can't have flourishing independent media if they can help it, because the whole revolution in America has been acquired through education and media. That's why one reason we went into the media field. That's one reason why my second and third books were on education, because I knew that the cultural Marxists were targeting those two institutions. So we said, guess what? We're going to go into those arenas then and counter them.
Yeah, and that's a perfect segue to our next segment to continue this discussion about these government bought and paid for media outlets. The critical theories that came out of the Frankfurt School, the Institute of Marxism that Brandon just described, are the same things that have been used to infect the Department of Defense and the United States Armed Forces, our big corporations, our small businesses, even our universities. And the fight to eradicate that stuff has to continue, and the independent media rise is a huge part of that fight. As a matter of fact, I would say we're the tip of the spear and continue to be critically important to the success of eradicating that in the Trump administration. We'll be right back with the CEO of Worldview Tube, Brandon House, here on the Rob Maness Show.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Would you like to gain access to over 20 years of my radio shows, TV shows, my books? I've written 15 books, and most of those books are ebooks now. And we have conference DVDs, conferences where we filmed our conferences at the Ozarks, literally starting 20 years ago. It's all available in our archived vault. All you have to do is go to worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and for a reasonable monthly fee, you gain access to over 20 years of Christian worldview programming, news, information, books, documentaries, and a powerful search engine. And folks, it's a great way not only to educate yourself, equip yourself, but it's a big way that you can help fund our continuation as a broadcast network. Please check it out. worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and help us continue pushing out a Christian worldview.
USA ID has gotten a lot of attention the last couple of days with some of these bizarre things that we've been, taxpayers have been funding. Now it looks like there are a couple media outlets that have been dragged into this conversation as far as USA ID funding as well. Does the president have any comment on that?
So upon coming out here to the briefing room, I was made aware of the funding from USAID to media outlets, including Politico, who I know has a seat in this room. And I can confirm that the more than $8 million taxpayer dollars that have gone to essentially subsidizing subscriptions to Politico on the American taxpayers' dime will no longer be happening. The Doge team is working on canceling those payments now. Again, this is a whole of government effort to ensure that We are going line by line when it comes to the federal government's books. And this president and his team are making decisions across the board on, do these receipts serve the interests of the American people? Is this a good use of the American taxpayers' money? If it is not, that funding will no longer be sent abroad, and American taxpayers will see.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show on Worldview Tube, and we're talking about the need for America to have a free press once again, as it is supposed to be the watchdog on government, the protector of individual rights, especially the right to think and speak freely, both in the press and by the people. Even those that are in the government should be able to think and speak freely. We have lost that. My guest today is the CEO of Worldview 2, Brandon House, and we've been talking about how our independent media outlet's been treated by the White House Correspondents Association, by Reuters, that's taken hundreds of millions of dollars of tax dollars and wanting to restrict the use of their feeds that we have paid a subscription for, and those kind of things. And Brandon, I wanted to show that clip because there was some question of Doge before Levitt made that announcement and made it official about Politico, about, well, Politico's not really being paid by the government, et cetera. But when they stopped the funding stream, they had to put a message out to their employees saying, hey, we've had a technical issue. We haven't paid you. They couldn't meet their payroll. That makes them probably 100% government media propaganda outlet, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And again, we haven't gotten any of that money, nor do I want it. Because again, if you take the money, there has to be strings attached, right? And so I say to everybody, tell everybody you know about Worldview Tube. Because we are an independent company, an organization. We don't take government money. Look, I've been screaming for a couple years now. National Public Radio, National Public Television. Go look it up. There are many reports they've gotten up to $500 million a year. National Public Radio, National Public Television. This has got to stop. We're being taxed for our money to go to people in the U.S. to push an agenda and ideology and a worldview completely contrary to the founding of our constitutional republic, which, by the way, that is how you collapse a country. You get the people of the country to destroy their own foundation, okay? And this is what Khrushchev actually told the then Secretary of Agriculture under Kennedy, Benson. He said, your kids will fall over into our hands like overripe fruit. Khrushchev said that to him. We're going to so indoctrinate your kids and grandkids that they will fall over into our hands like overripe fruit. Well, how do you do that? You have not only the enemies of America, China and others, funding opposition in the country, communist CCP fronts, but then you have your own government funding those that push the same narrative that America is evil. The source of all suffering and oppression is Christianity, the free market system, white European males. The whole system has been constructed by them to enslave people. Marriage is a form of enslavement. Everything is about the source of all suffering and oppression is Christianity, the free market system. And you put that out there. Even the Pledge of Allegiance, the national anthem, it's all racism. And the founding fathers, don't you know, were white supremacists. Even the Pentagon had put that out there. That's in one of my documentaries from a few years ago. So you fund these groups until you convince enough Americans to tear down their own government. This is clear Marxism 101. It's dialectical materialism. Okay, that's a big name, a big word, dialectical materialism. But it's the idea that you create conflict, and all change comes from the conflict. And that you finally get the people to destroy their own foundation because they have what is called a cognitive discourse, right? They cannot square their feelings with being an American. They have conflict. Oh, I'm an American. We're inherently evil and racist and white supremacist. So what do?
You get rid of the conflict that they're feeling by destroying the very fabric of their country, and thereby our enemies got our own people to have a revolution. And it's not just the communists doing this. The Muslim Brotherhood Memorandum said, we will get Americans to destroy their own country by their own hands and tear down their own miserable house. Anybody can go look up the Muslim Brotherhood Memorandum and see they said that. So that's the red-green axis. The red being the Marxist, the green being the Islamist. Oh, and what do you know? Even some companies, I don't know, maybe go look up some so-called conservative networks, see if they've had any big Muslims funding their networks. And then you wonder why certain so-called conservative networks never say anything hardly about the real worldview of Islam.
And that's why we need Worldview Tube and networks like it to sort through these things, because the attacks are seemingly coming from all directions. The infection is real. We have an infection. The antidote or the vaccination, whatever you want to call it, the medicine that we have available right now is independent media, the Trump administration coming back into power if they can drive the train into it, or the stake into the heart of this infection and help the people kill it. Because even, granted, I read something from a lieutenant colonel. That's a senior, mid-level to senior officer in the United States Army just yesterday, talking about how terrible a person Donald Trump was because he's getting rid of transgenders in the military, which are physically and mentally not qualified to be worldwide deployable. And that's a term that military members will know what I'm using, because I was a commander and my job was to have as many worldwide deployable individuals in my unit's mission as possible so we could go fight for America when called upon. And transgenders are inherently not worldwide qualified, but lieutenant colonels that are command selected, that means they pass through all the rings and everything and been made decisions on that they're going to command troops in the United States Army, in this case, are absolutely opposed to it and talking in ways about the commander-in-chief that just actually made my face turn red the first time I read it. That's the kind of stuff that we have to fight against. Well, Brandon, I know I got to let you go. I know we're covering the speech tonight. What are you looking for to come from the president tonight? And how will we independently report on it?
I'm hoping he will tell the American people things that you and I may already know, things this audience may already know, but tell them the things that the average boomer maybe doesn't know because they're still watching and listening to corporate media, NBC, CBS, ABC, NPR, CNN, MSNBC, people like that. Tell them the things that are going on, because some of them, while we know it, because you're on Worldview Tube, you watch Worldview Tube, I watch Worldview Tube, our audience is watching, and maybe they pick it up from some other conservative networks. A lot of the boomers out here still don't know the truth. He needs to go ahead and use this opportunity to go through without any filter from the corporate media and use those public airwaves to tell the American people what's really going on with government waste, corruption, fraud. I would like to see him say, hey, we'd like to know how this individual with a government salary of $200,000 has a net worth of $30 million, okay, while they work for the government for 25, 30 years. They went in with basically this net worth, came out with that. How did that happen? I'd like to have him tell us about the NGOs and some of the federal judges and some of the other elected officials that are tied to these NGOs that have gotten millions and maybe billions of dollars. The American people need to understand that Washington, D.C., as Donald Trump now knows, is not just a swamp. It is a cabal of corruption equal to worse than the mafia in many ways, because you either pay your money to the government or they will break your kneecaps and throw you in jail. This is money laundering and the shakedown of the American people, and it needs to end. We need to get rid of the federal income tax. We need to go to tariffs or national sales tax, but we need to set the American people free, and people should not be trying to struggle to buy groceries, their car insurance, their health insurance, their homeowners insurance, which, by the way, homeowners insurance is, for most of us, spiked 40% in the last year or so. No American should be struggling. This should be the land of milk and honey. And the common cause
is the federal government and taxation and corruption.
They're absolutely right. Well, Brandon, thank you so much for spending so much time with us today. And we will continue to advocate for getting the audience to grow on this network, and keep up the good fight, sir.
Thank you, Colonel. Thank you.
All right, after this break, we'll go to the audience to get their thoughts on the speech tonight. President Trump's State of the Union, after only about 45 days. We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Is the government tracking you? Do they have access to all your data? Well, if you go to worldviewtalk.com, you'll find out about a cell phone company that, well, does not store your data. They don't do that. This is what they're known for. They don't store your data. You have privacy. You're not being tracked. That's why a lot of folks are turning to worldviewtalk.com. You'll find their prices are very competitive. All the details are there at worldviewtalk.com. Again, worldviewtalk.com. Oh, while you're there, not only do they have cell phones that aren't tracking you, you can find out about how to get a satellite phone. Should the whole system go down and you want to communicate with a family member or a loved one, you might want to have a satellite phone. Or how about their solar generators? They have great solar generators. Check them all out right now. Worldviewtalk.com, worldviewtalk.com.
Matt Bennett, former Clinton White House Deputy Special Assistant and the co-founder of Third Way. So the Democrats are trying to figure a way to respond to the president's address to a joint meeting of Congress. They might be well served to consider the results of a new Harvard-Harris poll conducted by Democratic pollster Mark Penn, which found 52% of people approve of Donald Trump, 58% think he's doing a better job than Biden, 81% approve of his deportation of illegal immigrants who've committed crimes, 76% approve of Doge eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse, and 68% approve of his declaring there only to be two genders, male and female. So given and the Democratic approval rating, according to this poll, is 36% compared to 51% for Republicans. So what can Democrats effectively do to try to counter this tomorrow night? It doesn't sound like much.
Right. I think tomorrow night their tools are very limited, and I think that's going to be true for the next 2 years.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show here on Worldview Tube. It was great to have the CEO of Worldview Tube's Brandon House with us for the last 45 minutes, talking about the independent media and why networks like this one are important, folks. And you can go to worldviewtube.com and you can subscribe to the platform. There is a huge vault that if you pay a vault subscription, you get access to all of Brandon's books, his documentaries, all of the shows, libraries, including mine in there. And I think it's like $100 a year. It's very, very inexpensive for the vast amount of material. This man's been archiving this material since 1990. And this isn't some, some out of the way outlet here. This guy has stood in for Michael Reagan. He's interviewed Michael Reagan. He's interviewed Donald Trump. He ran and created and ran Lindell TV for Mike Lindell, and kept it in the mainstream, in the digital broadcasting space, and it's still going. All the while he was operating Worldview Tube on the side, really, to be honest with you, so that when he decided to take Worldview Tube and really push up the throttles and make it an independent media digital broadcasting outlet that will compete with the likes of ABC, CBS, and NBC, he was ready to go. And I'm honored to be part of this team and to have the privilege and opportunity to help get the real message out for the American people. Well, let's go over to the audience. And what do you all think about the president's speech tonight? A little clip there ran through the numbers. 81% approve of the president's deportation operation. There wasn't a number in there in that list that John just read off that was below 51%. This man's approval ratings are through the roof. And the title of the speech I think you're going to see is the renewal of the American dream. And in just 40-something days, I think 48 or 49 days now, the administration, without their entire team being confirmed and in place and hired yet, has made phenomenal strides and is really changing the country for real, not just narrative changes. So I'm excited to hear what he's got to say tonight. Hopefully there's some information out there we don't know that's going to be revealed. Okay, Shell, let's go ahead and take some questions from the audience or some comments.
We have crazy night again, sir.
Hey, Colonel, you moved off topic for me and into what the president's going to speak about tonight, so I'll refrain from going backwards. I'm out.
Okay, no problem. All right, who's next?
We have domestic terrorist grandma, sir.
Hello, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, good. Okay. So about tonight, it's not surprising that the Democrats are going to act like petulant little whiny babies, wanting to disrupt the president's message and his speech. They all act the same. When they don't get their way,